Hi everyone, it's Lauren and welcome to my third video in my roundup of the books that I read in the last year. So I've already done a video on my most disappointing and most surprising reads, and to come you have my most favourite reads of the year, but today we're going to be talking about the worst books that I read in 2019. There are only 5 of them, and really only a few of those 5 that properly deserve, my ire and hatred. The rest of them were just, I suppose disappointing. But yeah, so get your snark hats on and be ready for some extremely unfiltered opinions. So the first book I want to talk to you about today is probably my most hated book of the year and maybe all time, and I could have saved it till last, but I just couldn't bear the thought of someone maybe not watching till the end of this video and not hearing how awful this book is and, maybe reading it. I want to protect you from that, and that is How to Be a Woman by Caitlin Moran. Now this did come out relatively, in terms of feminism and just progression in society in general, it came out quite a few years ago. And when it originally came out, I heard very mixed things. Some people saying there's a lot of value in what she's saying in this book, and other people saying some of the elements are a little bit problematic. But I thought I'd give it a go and see what it's like, because a lot of people say that this book was their first introduction to the concept of feminism. It's part autobiography of Caitlin Moran's life and part manifesto on what one should be if one wants to be a woman. And my God, there are many opinions that she has on that front. I feel like there are so many examples of bad takes in this book, that she shouts at you in block capitals all the time, that if I really go into all the examples, I will just be talking about this book for half an hour and we won't get any further than that. But my biggest problem with this book, which is a theme that runs throughout all of the different chapters which kind of follow through a woman's life, like puberty, menstruation, sex, is that she is on one hand railing against the patriarchy and society's perceptions of women, and saying how awful it is that people think women are like this and they think women are all the same and everyone's like homogenous and everybody wants this kind of thing, when actually all women are like me. And she doesn't allow for any kind of differences, she doesn't allow for any different kind of lifestyle or perception. She is, in one hand, saying that society is wrong about what it perceives women to be, and then also telling you that you should be exactly like her. I just don't understand it. Apart from the fact that those opinions do verge on being rude and offensive, like she uses the word retard like multiple times, but she's mostly just not thought through any of these opinions. She hasn't extrapolated them, she's not thought about any woman who could have a different life to her, and she's just so authoritative with the way she tells you like the exact word you need to call your vagina. Like you should call your boobs this, like this is the word that every woman should use. And how stripping is bad. So if you strip, you're letting down all women, but burlesque dancing is okay because I like burlesque dancing, and you should never have a bikini wax because you're letting women down. Like, it's just so horrible to read, but also just really basic and flimsy opinions. She's not got anything backing up any of these ideas other than she thought them in her head, so therefore they must be right. And I'm gonna give myself a heart attack if I talk about this book anymore. Just please don't read it. Burn all of the copies that you've ever seen in any bookshop. The next book on my list is actually fine. It's actually a fine book. I just really didn't like it, and that's The Left Hand of Darkness by Ursula K. Le Guin. And I feel quite bad because my friend Kate really liked this book, and I think my real problem with it is that as a reader, I really prefer character-driven books. I am interested in world building, but really I want to believe the characters. I'm interested in how realistic and believable the dialogue is, if I can really see their motivation for what they're doing. And the problem with this book is it's really an examination of this idea of a planet. And for me, I didn't feel like I didn't have any emotional connection with any of the characters, and I found it really boring. And the concept is it's a human who has gone to this planet where everybody on the planet only has one gender. So everybody's androgynous, and when they want to have sex, when they want to reproduce, they sort of spontaneously become either male or female in order to reproduce, and then go back to being androgynous again. And I thought that was a really interesting idea, but it read as a list of things that happen in this world, and it read as like history without there really being any kind of characters. Our man who was walking around meeting everybody, I didn't really care about at all. There was a little bit of like stuff happening. I think I gave up on it quite early. I will say I got about halfway through and I thought, it's not for me. And at the point I gave up, the plot did start to ramp up a bit. But by that point I just didn't care about any of the characters. And I feel like our little explorer man was going off into tangents and learning about aspects of the world, which then didn't have any, like, didn't follow on into the plot. It didn't feel like to me. It was like he was just learning about, like, we'd spend chapters learning about these people who predict the future, and then he just left and did something else. So I didn't understand why we learned about that if it wasn't to do with our plot. So this really is based on what I enjoy and expect from a book, and not based on the quality of it as such. I think if you really enjoy that old school sci-fi, then you would really like this, as my friend Kate did. But it really wasn't for me. Number 3 on my list is The Low and Quiet Sea by Donal Ryan. I just thought this was so boring. And, you know, I hate to say it because I feel like I read women writers all the time and I really need to, like, branch out and read more men. But, oh, this was just so male. It made me sick. It's 3 different stories. You've got a guy who's a refugee, a young sort of teenage lad dealing with teenage boy problems, and then an old man who's kind of at the end of his life, reflecting back on his life. So it's 3 chapters. They're seemingly unrelated until the end, where they all, like, know each other, and it's so unnecessary because the 3 stories themselves are so different, and it didn't really feel like there was any kind of thematic or emotional link between them. So I don't understand why these characters were all in the same book. The first section about the guy who was getting his family away from what we would assume is a country like Syria, I thought was really good, and I think that's partly why I'm so disappointed in this book, because I really enjoyed that bit. And then we just went off to a teenage boy moaning about non-existent problems, and it just felt really why. Number 4 on my worst books of the year, unfortunately, is Tentacle by Rita Indiana, which I read with Jen and Jean, and we thought this was going to be really good. And to be fair to this book, I think this probably should have been on my, like, most disappointed list, rather than worst, like, objectively. But it sounded really cool. It was all about, like, a Caribbean islands in a dystopian, post-apocalyptic almost future, or maybe pre-apocalyptic, and it took elements of, like, the tempest, and, like, the sea was drying out, and there were so many different aspects on it which sounded really cool. And the main character was trying to save up for, like, gender reassignment surgery, it seemed like, and it just had so many themes which we thought, this sounds really cool and interesting. But when you read it, it was so messy, and it was a really short book, and I still couldn't get through it. And normally I quite like it when authors don't spoon feed you and they just throw you into the world. But this was so complex. There was lots of different timelines happening as well, and lots of different characters who I suppose were kind of interlinked, but it wasn't clear how. And stuff was just flying at you, and it was like plot, more plot, and then this man, like, went back in time and was a slave. It was like so crazy, and I just was like, I need to just slow down a bit, just explain a little bit, because I can't see what's in your head. That's what I felt like as I read it. So yeah, more disappointed than bad, but also I still didn't finish it, so I guess still probably quite bad. And finally, this might be controversial, I don't know, because it's been quite well received. But the last book on this list that I really didn't like was Ordinary People by Diana Evans. And I just thought this was so weak as a book. And I think I don't like it more because it was, like, shortlisted for awards and everyone was talking about it. And I just didn't get it at all. The weirdest thing about this book is that the whole story seems to be premised around the John Legend album Ordinary People, and, like, there's one section where one of the characters is just, like, listing about how each song in this album is relevant to his life, and I was just like, who thought this was a good idea? I just don't understand. But mainly it's about 2 couples, 2 marriages in crisis essentially, and they're falling apart, and everybody in these couples feels unhappy for different reasons. And normally I quite like books like that because I enjoy it when you see, for example, a man and a wife and both of them are unhappy, and you sort of understand why both of them are unhappy for different ways. They've got their own perspectives. But this just felt miserable. And both the men typically were like, oh my God, I just want to have, like, a bachelor pad and get away from my family. And I thought, oh my God, this is such a boring perspective. Oh, the man feels like stifled by family life, and yet the woman is, like, there raising the children and also feels stifled, but the man can't see it. And I just thought, oh, I don't know. And then there was, like, a weird bit about, like, Michael Jackson's death, which came out of nowhere, and then a weird bit about that she might have a ghost in her house. I just feel like there was too many, like, metaphors that was trying to explain the breakdown of marriage, and then a whole bit about Crystal Palace as well, about how they built the Crystal Palace, and it was so amazing and it had all stuff in it, but then they took all the stuff away and now it's an empty shell. And I was like, oh my God, is that like a metaphor for your marriage. Like, it was so often, everything was a metaphor, and I was like, I'm just tired of this. It's really, like, it just wasn't as well written as it thought it was. I think that's what annoyed me about it. And yet people seemed to talk about it like it was really good. So I don't know what happened there, but I was very, very disappointed in that book. So I hope that was okay to watch and not just boring and hearing me ranting about books I hated. I normally like hearing people review books badly as well as when they enjoyed them, because I feel like it makes the good reviews like mean more, you know, when people talk about stuff they don't like as well. And you know, sometimes it's healthy just to like get that anger out of you onto a video, onto the internet. What a healthy thing for me to be doing. So I'd love to hear from you. One, if you've read any of these books, please like rant with me in the comments, or tell me I'm wrong if you really loved them. Happy to have that discussion as well. And let me know what other books you really hated this year. Let's get all our anger out before the new year, and then after New Year's, my top 10 favourite books of the year video will be coming out, and that is full of some complete gems. So stay tuned for the good news coming in the new year, and I'll see you next time. Bye.